The door clicked shut behind her, and before Patrice said a word, I knew she had rehearsed this moment. She placed a folder on Howard Mercer's desk with careful fingers, aligning the corners with the edge of the blotter like a woman arranging evidence at her own trial without realizing it. Her perfume reached me first, sharp and expensive, the same scent she wore to family dinners where she kissed my cheek and called me sister in front of people who believed her. Then she leaned close enough that only I was supposed to hear. "Sign away your inheritance," she said, "or I will tell your husband about your past." I did not flinch. I did not ask what past. I already knew. I reached into my purse, took out my phone, and opened the recording I had cued before I ever walked into that office. I did not press play yet. I just let her see the screen. Then I smiled. "Before you make that call," I said, "you should listen to something." Patrice went still. 3 months earlier, none of this existed. No folder, no threat, no locked law office with the blinds half closed, and a woman who had once hugged me at a funeral trying to blackmail me out of a dead man's final gift. There had only been another funeral. Elijah Bennett had been the kind of man who built quietly and let the buildings speak. He started with one tired duplex on the east side and turned it into a real estate and construction business that employed cousins, neighbors, church friends, and half the men who had once told him he was thinking too big. By the time I married into the family, his name meant something in 3 states. When Elijah died, the Bennett house felt colder within hours. Not because the heat was off, but because the person everyone orbited around was gone. People moved through rooms speaking softly, carrying plates nobody ate, touching chairbacks like furniture could answer questions. I stood near the back of the funeral home because that was where I had always stood with that family. I was Andre Bennett's widow. That made me part of them on paper and in memory, but not quite in practice. Andre had been Elijah and Ruth's younger son, the one with the easy laugh and quiet mind, the one who could calm a room without asking for attention. He had died 16 months before Elijah, a sudden cardiac event that split my life into before and after so sharply that I still sometimes woke up expecting the old world to be there. 4 years after Andre's death, I married Malcolm Reed, a corporate attorney with steady eyes and a habit of listening all the way to the end before forming an opinion. Malcolm loved me without trying to compete with grief. That was one reason I trusted him. But the Bennett family never quite knew what to do with me after that. Ruth, Elijah's widow, was kind in a tired way. She would squeeze my hands and tell me Andre had loved me deeply, then get pulled away by someone who needed her grief to comfort theirs. Elijah always treated me with a respect that felt less like politeness and more like recognition. He never asked me to perform family. He simply made room at the table and expected everyone else to deal with it. Patrice hated that. She was married to Julian, Elijah's oldest surviving son, and she had spent more than a decade positioning herself as the daughter-in-law who held everything together. She brought soup to hospitals, coordinated holiday menus, remembered birthdays, arranged flowers, managed guest lists, and made sure everyone noticed just enough of her labor to call it devotion. She included me in conversations the way people include a chair in a room. Present, useful, not expected to speak. At Elijah's service, Patrice stood beside Ruth, one hand on her shoulder, receiving condolences like a woman already auditioning to inherit the center of the family. I did not resent her comfort. Grief makes people reach for whoever stands closest. But I watched her that day and felt a flicker of something I could not name yet. She was too ready, too composed, too careful about who saw her wiping Ruth's tears. The will was read 2 weeks later in Howard Mercer's downtown office. Dark wood paneling, old books, thick carpet, and the faint smell of paper that had outlived several arguments. Howard had been Elijah's attorney for more than 20 years. He looked older than he had at the funeral, or maybe he simply knew what was about to happen. Elijah's estate was larger than most of the family understood. There was the lake house in Michigan with the wide porch and cedar swing where generations of Bennett children had learned to swim and grown people had gone to argue in private. There were shares in Bennett Ridge Construction, the family company Julian had been helping run, though helping was a generous word by then. There was an investment portfolio Elijah had built quietly over decades. There was an art collection he had assembled from estate sales, small galleries, and back rooms where he trusted his eye more than anyone else's opinion. Everyone assumed Patrice's branch would receive the most. I could feel that assumption in the room. Julian sat beside her with his jaw set and his phone face down, trying to look like a man prepared for responsibility. Ruth dabbed at her eyes. Two cousins whispered near the window. Patrice sat straight-backed, hands folded, wearing a navy dress and pearls, the picture of patient entitlement. Howard read for nearly 40 minutes. Then he paused. "There is one additional primary beneficiary," he said. The room shifted. I looked down at my hands before he said my name because something inside me already knew. "Simone Bennett is named with equal standing to the other primary heirs." No one spoke. I did not ask for that. I need that understood. In the weeks that followed, Patrice would try to build a version of the story where I manipulated an aging widower, where I used grief and softness to position myself near his money. None of that happened. Elijah and I had something simpler than strategy. He liked that I never asked him for anything. I liked that he never required me to pretend I was less observant than I was. During Andre's illness, Elijah and I spent long afternoons in waiting rooms while everyone else came and went. We talked about leases, history, his mother's biscuit recipe, jazz records, property taxes, and how grief has a way of making people either honest or theatrical. He knew I had loved his son. He knew I did not need applause for it. After Andre died, I still visited Ruth. I still brought Elijah books. I still checked on the lake house when storms came through. Not for inheritance, for Andre, for love, for the part of me that still belonged to that family even when Patrice tried to write me out of every room. Patrice's face did not change during the reading. That was the first thing that warned me. Most people betray themselves in the first second of shock. A twitch, a blink, a breath caught wrong. Patrice gave us nothing. Her expression stayed warm, sympathetic, and entirely controlled. From that day forward, she changed. She started calling more often. Coffee invitations, lunch invitations, little texts asking how I was really holding up. She asked me to help sort old photographs at Ruth's house, though she had never wanted my hands anywhere near family albums before. She sat across from me in restaurants and asked questions that sounded affectionate until I replayed them later. Where had I lived before Andre? Who were my closest friends in college? Had I ever been married before? Why did I switch majors senior year? Was there any part of my life Malcolm did not know about? At first, I told myself grief had softened her. Families sometimes try to gather after loss. Maybe Patrice was reaching for me in the only way she knew how. But her questions were not bridges. They were shovels. I found out what she was digging for at a baby shower on a Tuesday afternoon. Her younger sister, full of sparkling wine and too much confidence, laughed while balancing a paper plate on her knee and said, "Patrice hired some background check man. She is convinced you are hiding something." She said it like gossip. I smiled like gossip was all it was. Then I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, put both palms on the sink, and stared at my own face until the cold in my chest settled into something useful. I knew what a thorough search might find. When I was 22, in my final semester of college, I was arrested. Even now, that sentence lands harder than the truth deserves. Arrested? I almost told Malcolm that week. 3 different times I sat with him at our kitchen table after dinner and felt the words gather behind my teeth. 3 times I swallowed them because I was still trying to decide whether confession under threat was truth or just fear wearing a nicer dress. Then I remembered something Andre had told me years before he died. It had been an ordinary Saturday. We were cleaning out his father's garage, sorting old tools, paint cans, and boxes labeled in Elijah's blocky handwriting. Andre had paused with a wrench in one hand and looked at me with an expression I did not recognize. "Simone," he said, "if something ever feels wrong, if people start acting strange and you don't know who to trust, look in my desk." I laughed then because I thought he was being dramatic. "What are you, leaving me spy instructions?" He smiled, but he did not laugh. "Just remember," he said, "grief does strange things to memory. Some part of me I property. She had not an insurance. That was, I think. I have been in this family much longer. I helped Ruth, I helped Elijah, I helped keep Bennett Ridge from falling apart while everyone else was grieving. This should have been mine. I let her words sit between us. And if I don't sign? That was when her face changed. Not much. Patrice never gave away more than she intended, but the warmth left her eyes. She leaned forward. "Sign away your inheritance," she said, "or I will tell Malcolm about your past." There it was, not implied, not softened, not wrapped in concern. A threat. For a moment I felt something close to sadness. That surprised me. I had imagined anger, triumph maybe in the small private part of me that wanted her to finally show herself. But sitting across from Patrice, I remembered the woman who had sat beside me during one of Andre's chemo appointments and handed me coffee without asking if I needed it. I remembered her bringing soup to my apartment when I had the flu. He had. Elijah made a choice. Andre left evidence. You made threats. Howard closed the folder. Given what occurred today, combined with the evidence Ms. Bennett has provided regarding suspected document alterations, I will file to remove you as a beneficiary under the forfeiture clause. I strongly recommend you retain independent counsel immediately. This is no longer only an estate matter. Patrice stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. For a moment I thought she would keep fighting. One more speech, one more accusation, one more attempt to turn herself into the injured party. But there was nothing left in the room for her to use. She gathered the renunciation papers that would never carry my signature and walked out. Her heels struck the hardwood fast and sharp until the outer door closed behind her. I sat still. I had imagined feeling victorious. Instead, I felt emptied out, like my body had been holding its breath for weeks and did not know yet how to breathe normally. Howard studied me. "Are you all right?" I thought about lying. It would have been polite. "I don't know yet," I said. "I think I need time to understand what just happened." He nodded. "Take whatever time you need, but Simone, Elijah left one more thing. A letter. He asked me to give it to you once matters became clear, whichever direction they went." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. My name was written across the front in Elijah's familiar, slightly shaky hand. I did not open it there. Some words deserve quiet. The story traveled through the family faster than I expected, though maybe families are built for that. News moves through bloodlines faster than mail. Ruth called me that evening. Her voice was thin and shaking in a way I had not heard even at Andre's funeral. "Is it true?" she asked. "What Howard told me. About Patrice. About the signatures." I sat on the edge of my bed and told her the truth, not cruelly, not with extra details for punishment, but fully enough that she would not have to keep asking questions into the dark. I told her about the forged signatures, the altered schedules, the power of attorney form Elijah did not remember signing, the threat in Howard's office, the recordings Andre had left behind. Ruth cried. "I defended her," she said. "Every time Elijah was confused, every time Andre said something felt off, I told him Patrice was the one keeping us together." "You loved who you thought she was," I said. "I should have listened to my son." There was nothing useful to say to that except the gentlest truth I had. Grief makes people trust the person who brings the casserole. Ruth laughed once through tears, then cried harder. Malcolm was harder. Not because I feared him exactly, because telling him meant finally pulling that 20-year-old knight out of the sealed room where I had kept it. It meant admitting that I had let fear decide what he deserved to know. The night after the meeting, I asked him to sit with me at the kitchen table. I told him everything: the roommate, the warrant, the holding cell, the dropped charges, the expunged record, the shame that was not guilt but still felt heavy, Patrice's threat, Andre's recording, all of it. Malcolm listened without interrupting. That is one of the things I love about him. He does not rush to rescue a sentence before it finishes telling the truth. When I was done, he sat back and rubbed both hands over his face. "You should have told me," he said. My stomach tightened. I know. Not because it changes anything, he said. Because you have been carrying fear inside our marriage that I would have helped you carry. That undid me. He came around the table and pulled me into his arms. I cried harder than I had cried in Howard's office, harder than I had cried when Patrice walked out. Not because Malcolm forgave me. That was not quite the word. I cried because some part of me had been braced for 20 years against a rejection that did not arrive. No more locked rooms, he said against my hair. No more, I said. The legal process moved over the following weeks. Patrice was formally stripped of her inheritance under Elijah's forfeiture clause. Howard's office referred the forged documents for review, and Patrice's new attorney began sending careful letters full of phrases like misunderstanding and lack of intent. Peter Langston's analysis made those phrases harder to sustain. Julian separated himself from her publicly faster than anyone expected. I will not pretend that looked noble to me. He had benefited from her control when it served him. Now that it threatened him, he called it betrayal. Families are very good at renaming convenience as principle. Ruth moved through those weeks like a woman grieving twice, once for her husband and once for the version of Patrice she had trusted. I visited her on Sundays. We sat in Elijah's kitchen drinking coffee, sometimes talking, sometimes letting the old house creak around us. She apologized more than once. I stopped her after the third time. Ruth, you don't have to keep bleeding to prove you understand. She reached across the table and took my hand. Andre always said you had more grace than this family deserved. I smiled, but it hurt. When it came time to settle the estate, I surprised almost everyone. I did not keep everything Elijah left me. I kept the lake house because Andre's laugh still lived on that porch, and because Elijah had once told me the place needed someone who understood memory was not the same as ownership. I kept enough of the investment portfolio to secure my future and protect Malcolm and me from ever needing to ask permission from people who confuse money with power. The rest, the majority, I redirected. I established the Elijah and Andre Bennett Scholarship for students pursuing forensic accounting, estate law, and financial investigation. It felt right. Andre's careful attention had protected his father when nobody else listened. Elijah's final clause had protected me when Patrice thought I was alone. If their names were going to sit on money, I wanted that money helping other people learn how to find the truth hidden in paperwork. Howard cried when I told him. He pretended he had allergies. I let him. On the last day I needed to visit Howard's office for estate business, he handed me Elijah's letter again. You ready for this now? I took it home. That evening I sat in Andre's study, the same room where I had found the drive. The desk lamp cast a soft circle over the wood. Beside it sat a photograph from my wedding to Andre, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. I opened Elijah's envelope carefully. Simone, if you are reading this, then I imagine money has done what money always does. It has shown people to themselves. I did not leave you what I left because blood required it. I did not do it because you asked. You never did. That is part of why I trusted you. You loved my son without trying to turn his illness into a stage for your own suffering. You stayed kind to Ruth even when this family made your place harder than it needed to be. You told me the truth when easier answers were available. Integrity is quiet most days. That is why so many people mistake it for weakness. Do not let them. Take care of what remains. Take care of yourself. You have earned peace, Simone. Please let yourself have it. Elijah. I folded the letter and placed it beside Andre's photograph. For a long time, I just sat there. I thought about Patrice leaning across Howard's desk, certain the worst night of my youth could still be used to control the woman I had become. I thought about Andre's voice telling me he had known and chosen me anyway. I thought about Elijah, old and tired and sharper than anyone had given him credit for, building a trap into his will because he understood that greed often smiles before it hisses. My phone buzzed. Malcolm. Dinner at 6. No more secrets. I read it twice. Then I smiled, a real smile this time, unguarded and light. Always. I typed back, For the first time since Elijah's funeral, since Andre's death, since that night in college I had spent 20 years trying to outrun, I felt something I had almost forgotten was possible. I felt free. Patrice thought my past would make me surrender. She did not understand that truth, once spoken by the people who actually love you, does not destroy you. It returns you to yourself. If this story found you tonight, tell me this. Have you ever had someone try to use your old pain as leverage, only to discover you were no longer afraid of it? Leave a